Jujutsu Kaisen revolves around a 15-year-old kid named Yuji Itadori. Despite having lived a pretty hard life, he has endless bounds of optimism and, most importantly, near superhuman athletic ability. One day, his grandfather, the person who had raised him up until this point in his life, passes away. But before he can, he tells Itadori one thing. You're a strong kid, so help people. It doesn't have to be all the time, just whenever you can. You may feel lost, don't expect gratitude, just help them. When it's your time to go, make sure you're surrounded by others, don't end up like me. Before he really has time to process, well, anything, he's thrown into the strange new world of Jujutsu sorcery. A world that is on the brink of an all-out war, and Itadori is placed right smack dab in the middle. In order to try and save somebody's life, just like his grandfather told him to, he swallowed a special grade cursed object, an action that could have very much gotten him killed. Instead, he fuses with the object, unknowingly rebirthing an ancient evil called Sukuna to live inside of him like a parasite. Sukuna is one of the most interesting parts about Jujutsu Kaisen in my opinion. He is both the source of strength for moral compass and the protagonist, but also the biggest hindrance. He's essentially a spectator, but one with a big enough mouth to be able to just change the entire story on a whim if he so chooses. He has done this before, literally killing Itadori and bringing him back to life just for the fun of it. The problem is that he won't be a spectator for long, as if he grows to a certain power inside of Itadori, he can take over completely and be rebirthed into the world at full power, free to wreak havoc as he did thousands of years ago. This of course doesn't sit well with the already politically unstable world of Jujutsu sorcerers, who see Itadori as a ticking time bomb, not as a human being. So much so that they're willing to do anything to kill him, even if other people get caught in the crossfire. The one thing that stands in Itadori's way of certain death is another one of the most interesting parts of Jujutsu Kaisen, Satoru Gojo. If Gojo just rolled out of bed one morning and decided to decimate the entire world, he very well could, and nobody would be able to stop him. He essentially won the genetic lottery 3 times over, being born from one of the strongest sorcerer families, inheriting not just 1 but 4 overpowered abilities, just being overall insanely strong, and looking really cool while doing it. Somebody with this much strength obviously wouldn't take anything seriously. He's a smart aleck who always has just as much luck as he does wit, always having a comeback prepared even if it falls flat. For the most part, he's exactly like Sukuna. He does whatever he wants, a lot of times just changing the story on a whim because he feels like it. Somebody with this much strength, somebody who holds the world in their hand like a plaything, what did they do with all of that power? Gojo's answer is to become a teacher. The Jujutsu world is one that is purely led by old traditions and values. These values have worked for thousands of years, but are beginning to buckle under the pressure of the new age. This is the reason the Jujutsu world is in a cold war. Everybody is waiting for it to break, hoping to claim a mantle of power from the pieces. Still, the elders of the Jujutsu world are refusing to change, instead blindly hoping everything will sort itself out. Gojo was a passive observer in all of this. He has been since he was born, and he's fed up. He realizes that the only way things are going to get better is if they change. The old geezers at the top won't budge, so Gojo decides to start from scratch with a new generation. A new generation who are taught to think for themselves and not just blindly follow orders. A new generation of people that he can consider his equals. Yeah, Gojo isn't perfect, sometimes he can be a bit of a show-off, but still, being a teacher is a pretty noble goal. One that you wouldn't expect from somebody with his strength to take a liking to. So naturally, Gojo takes Yuji Itadori under his wing, not only because he wants to help him grow, but as a bit of a middle finger to the elders who want Itadori gone as soon as possible. Itadori gets enrolled at a school for other young sorcerers like him, learning to control their powers called Jujutsu High. Despite being called a high school, it's not exactly what you would think. It's no UA from My Hero, where we have more characters than the author can keep track of. The school only has 9 students in total, with 2 teachers, as people who can wield curse energy are pretty rare. So instead of having a curriculum to teach the masses, Jujutsu High focuses more on bringing up individual students, as most sorcerers' abilities are very different from one another. Sort of like Nen abilities in Hunter x Hunter or Jutsus from Naruto. For example, one of the students, Megumi Fushiguro, primarily fights by summoning Shikigami or cursed spirits to fight for him, kind of like Pokemon. It's a little hard to train him the same way you would train Mai Zenin, a sorcerer whose ability is her superhuman strength and skill when it comes to wielding weapons. or Toge Inumaki, who is a cursed speech user, meaning that almost anything he says can come into fruition. This can range from him instantly making his opponents fall asleep to straight up exploding. This individuality is what makes the characters of Jujutsu Kaisen my favorite thing about the series. In order to explain, let's take a look at one of JJK's parents, Bleach. In Bleach, the story revolves around a high schooler named Ichigo Kurosaki, as he is thrust into the inner workings of an organization of Soul Reapers in another dimension called the Soul Society, who all work together to fight scary demons. I know that was a lot to throw at you, but I can't spend all day talking about Bleach, because that's for another video. One of the most compelling things about Bleach is the aforementioned Soul Society, or more specifically, the people who run it, the 13 captains. At first, all these characters don't seem that special. They all have a single character trait that defines them, giving a false impression that they are all cliché and boring. But as the story progresses, and you learn more about how these characters came to define themselves, does Bleach really come into its own? It makes it all the more interesting to see their relationships with one another, and how all of their traits have either grown to define them as people, either merge or collide. Whenever one of these two characters argue with each other, you know that they are arguing to defend the ideas that made them characters. If they were to lose that argument, they would lose everything that they had been through up until that point. Gege Akutami doesn't choose to do this with his characters. Instead, he evolves it by adding a third layer. Jujutsu Kaisen's characters, much like Bleach, have all had things in their past that have made them who they are as people today. This is where the third layer comes in. When these characters' morals and beliefs do collide, this third layer being who they can become. In Bleach, who these characters are isn't ever really going to change. Sure, there may be some exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, you are watching characters who are solidified in their beliefs as they have had hundreds if not thousands of years to dwell on them. Characters in JJK have not had that luxury because majority of them are still kids in high school. They would like to believe that they have themselves figured out, but when they do collide with somebody who thinks the opposite, it makes them really take a look at themselves and wonder if they need to change as people. This element of JJK really comes to light during the Kyoto Goodwill event arc, where the two Japanese jujutsu schools come together to battle it out in a friendly competition. Though this time there's a lot more at stake than bragging rights, as the rival schools is under orders from their principal to kill Itadori. At first when you look at the rival school, you think you have them immediately figured out simply based off of shonen cliches. Pretty one, stupid one, quiet one, and ones with weird powers. It can be a shock when they, for the most part, fully upend these tropes to become characters that you actually care about. None such is a better example than Todo. At first glance, he looks like the gorilla of the group, big and strong with not much going on upstairs. Whenever he first meets anybody, the first thing he asks them is what their type in woman is, and he'll beat you up based on your answer. Luckily for Itadori, they have the same taste, tall girls with big butts. Once Todo finds out about this, his demeanor completely changes, and we get to see the real Todo, who is nothing short of a genius when it comes to combat. He decides, instead of killing Itadori, he's going to help him become better and reach his full potential as a jujutsu sorcerer. Another character that really intrigued me was Maki, one of the second years at Itadori's school that I mentioned earlier. She comes from one of the aforementioned clans that are preparing for war with the rest of the jujutsu world, the Zenin clan. She was born with superhuman strength and agility, but zero cursed energy. She can't even see cursed spirits without the use of her glasses, which was very much frowned upon by the Zenin clan. So Maki and her twin sister Mai were only ever meant to be servants to the Zenin family, nothing more than just tortured, abused souls, never destined for anything greater. Still, Maki stays strong in order to protect her sister, and decides to do that by making a more accepting jujutsu world. One day she leaves the Zenin family with the promise that she will return a strong sorcerer, and claim the mantle of leadership over the clan. As punishment, the clan also outcasts not only Maki, but her sister Mai as well, who is content with living as a servant. And this makes Mai resent Maki and develop a deep hatred for her, not understanding why she would ever want to forge her own path. They go to separate schools to hone their abilities, which Maki does very well, so much so in fact that she eventually soars to the top, becoming the strongest student among her peers. Yet she's only ranked grade 4, the weakest rank of sorcerers. This is because the Zenin clan uses their influence to make sure she can't progress in fear that they could tarnish the Zenin clan name. Still, Maki pushes on, and this all comes to a head when Mai and Maki face off in the Kyoto Goodwill event. This fight isn't even close, with Maki beating Mai. Out of commission, Mai finally gets to tell Maki about how she feels about everything. about how Maki abandoned her and forced her to become somebody that she wasn't. When she asked her why she left, Maki says that she did it because she was tired of being treated like she was worthless. The best thing about this interaction is that nothing really changes. I know I just talked up a storm about how these characters evolve and change over time, and the example that I use is one that doesn't change. Well, that's because it hasn't happened yet. At least not in season 1 of the anime, but what I'm trying to say is that Geiji Akutami is a very patient writer when it comes to setting things up for the future. Interactions or concepts mentioned all the way back in the first arc haven't even been touched upon yet. It's not because Geiji forgot, but because he's saving them as ingredients for later. Maki and Mai are a perfect example of this, but as I mentioned earlier, I want to keep this video relatively spoiler free, and this is like season 3 or 4 material, so if you know, you know. One last thing I want to touch on is the magic system, cursed energy, and how Geiji Akutami uses it. In anime, you can have 2 types of magic systems, one that is simple enough for a toddler to understand, or one that you need a PhD to comprehend. Usually for the latter, you're kind of supposed to just accept everything that happens, which gives the author the ability to do anything that they want. So you're not supposed to memorize all of the chakra points in Naruto, offshoot types of Nen in Hunter x Hunter, or whatever the heck D4C's deal is in JoJo's. Cursed energy in JJK is kinda like this. If you pay close enough attention, you might get it, but still, there's so much stuff that Akutami introduces each chapter that he will constantly reinvent the wheel and make things complicated for the fun of it. For example, there's a technique that Itadori uses called Black Flash that is extremely hard to pull off, but in doing so, it amplifies his strength by the power of 2.5. Not times 2.5, to the power of 2.5. Why did he have to make it to the power of 2.5? Why couldn't he just make it simple? Well, that's because Akutami felt like it. In the volume release of Volume 8 of JJK, where Black Flash was introduced, he says that he wanted to do something different than expected, because why not? This is what I love about JJK. It isn't trying to break away from the series that came before as a slight to them, but as a sign of respect. A good way to put it is that all of the series that inspired Jujutsu Kaisen are Top Gun, yes, the Navy movie starring Tom Cruise. I think that the original Top Gun is an okay movie. I've watched it countless times over the years and my opinion has not wavered a bit. Majority of the charm I feel comes from the fact that it's an 80s as crap movie that feels like a time capsule from that era. Is this how I feel about the series that inspired JJK like Bleach, Hunter x Hunter, Naruto, Evangelion? Heck no. But I do think that in some places they show their age. Sometimes that's a good thing, but most of the time it's a bad thing. JJK, on the other hand, is Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick is an 80s as crap movie that feels like a time capsule from that era in the modern day while adding a new spin and evolving what came before, making one of the greatest movies ever made. JJK and Top Gun Maverick didn't reinvent the wheel. Instead, they updated it so that fans new and old can enjoy it. So many series just kinda try to straight up copy what came before, without ever really understanding what made its predecessors special. Then there's Jujutsu Kaisen, not only understanding, but knowing when to make changes in order to truly pay respect to the past. And I think that that's something really special.